Get your bag and go. I stared at my father, my mouth open. What? I said, pack your stuff. You're done here. Rain tapped against the window behind him. I could see my reflection shaking in a glass. Dad, what did I do? He didn't look at me, just folded his arms. You embarrassed me. At dinner, I whispered. I only said. You talk back, he snapped. In front of everyone. Linda stood behind him, her lips tight. You always do this, she said softly. You make life harder than it needs to be. I turned to her. I didn't do anything to you. She sighed like I was a burden she'd carried too long. That's the problem. You're always nothing. My throat burned. Dad, please. He finally looked at me. His eyes were flat. You're 17, old enough to survive. Survive? My voice cracked. You're my father, and you're my responsibility no more. I looked past him and saw my little brother Ethan on the stairs, holding his game controller like it mattered more than my life. Ethan, I said. He didn't answer. Dad, where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Linda handed him a trash bag. He handed it to me. Inside were my clothes. Wrinkled. Stuffed. Like garbage. I held the bag with both hands. You can't do this. I already did. Tears dropped onto the plastic. I love you. He didn't say it back. Please, I whispered. Get out, he said. I stood there, shaking, waiting for him to change his mind. He didn't. Linda opened the door. Cold air rushed in. Rain wrapped around my face. Go, she said. I stepped onto the porch barefoot. The door slammed. I stood there, staring at it. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. My chest hurt. I turned and walked into the rain. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from my mom's old number, even though she'd been gone for years. I opened it. Be strong. I laughed out loud. Strong? I walked until my feet ached and my jeans stuck to my legs. I ended up under a bus stop. The lights above flickered. Cars passed like I wasn't real. I hugged the trash bag to my chest. Great job, I whispered to myself. You finally messed up enough to disappear. A man sat on the bench beside me. He smelled like smoke and sadness. You okay, kid? He asked. I shook my head. Got nowhere to go. I sniffed. No. He looked away. Me neither. Silence sat between us like a wall. I checked my phone. No messages. No calls. I typed my father's number, then deleted it. Don't beg, I told myself. The man stood up. Cold night. Yeah. He nodded at my bag. That's all you own? For now. He gave a dry laugh. Life's funny like that. I forgot he was there. I cried into my knees until my head felt empty and my heart felt dead. I whispered his name one last time. Dad. Nothing answered. My hands were numb. My ears burned. My stomach twisted. I lay back on the bench and stared at the dark. This isn't how it ends, I told the sky. It can't be. The rain soaked my hair. My eyes closed. I dreamed of our old kitchen. My dad laughing. Ethan asking me to play. My mom standing near the door, smiling. Then I woke up. Alone. I sat up straight, gasping. You're not my problem anymore, his voice echoed. I wiped my face with my sleeve. No, I said out loud. I'm not your problem. I stood up, shaking. I'll never beg you again, I said to the empty street. I promise, Mrs. Grant whispered. Eat slowly, child, and pushed warm soup toward me. Eyes nervous, doorway shadowed by evening outside tonight. I said, thank you, ma'am, while counting crackers like coins, afraid tomorrow would remember my name cruelly again and loudly. She answered, keep studying, then slipped apples into pockets and a bus pass between trembling fingers for school someday soon. I laughed, school kicked me out, and she frowned. Hunger never expels determined students anywhere who argue with dreams nightly. Couches changed nightly, names blurred, and I joked, I collect sofas like broken promises nowadays from friends laughing gently apologetically. They answered, doors close early, and I smiled. So do stomachs on unlucky calendars inside young cities everywhere, sometimes painfully. In warehouses, I stacked boxes and dreams, whispering, lift faster heart. Rent lifts heavier shadows, over thin beds nightly always. At sinks I sang, soap teaches patience, while plates argued, break now. Nobody blames porcelain here, except lonely palms trembling. I slept inside my car saying, wheels promise travel, while hunger preferred circles beneath headlights during winter rehearsing goodbyes silently. Morning asked, "Ready yet?" And I replied, "Ready costs money. I spend courage instead before breakfast judges bravery harshly today." Mr. Donnelly shook my hand, saying, "Start Thursday," and I said, "Start forever, please, today, sir, somehow, gladly, desperately, always." He laughed, "Pays low," and I promised I'd grow tall inside short paychecks until courage mortgages tomorrow forgives dreams quietly. He noticed my books and asked, "Night classes?" And I whispered, "Night university, sir, under starlight hunger pencils hope rising." He said, "Don't quit learning," and I replied, "Learning quit me first at 17, then taught Bill's grammar persistence sternly." I confessed, "My father vanished," and he answered, "Fathers sometimes fear seeing themselves truthfully inside poor mirrors nightly shattering glass-like." He added, "Let absence tutor you," and I nodded, "Tuition hurts like hunger lessons, yet graduates courage eventually paying proudly." One night, I saw Ethan online wearing gold, and I muttered, "So watches choose favorites before blood argues loudly inside." I typed, "Looks nice, brother," then erased words until silence answered with thunderous permission for crying privately inside steering darkness. I told my steering wheel, "Drive anywhere," and it obeyed, toward becoming nobody famous by tomorrow's sunrise rumors everywhere always. In parking lots I whispered, "Feed me tomorrow," and hope replied, "Serve yourself today. Menu courage, savings, breath, persistent strength." Mrs. Grant called nightly asking, "Alive?" And I joked, "Practicing resurrection before breakfast daily, still starving, smiling, stubborn, hopefully loud." She scolded, "Wear socks," and I confessed, "Even feet negotiate glory nowadays shamelessly, with fate frost highways, destiny, giggling somewhere." I borrowed, libraries whispering, "Teach escape," and pages answered, "Build wings from sentences daily into maps, exits, courage practical tomorrow." At dawn I practiced smiles, saying, "Employers hire faces," and mirrors disagreed, "Hire storms inside lungs fuming hopeful backwards today." Mr. Donnelly taught, "Arrive early," and I vowed, "Leave despair later than payday behind desks, elevators, fear whispers yesterday forgotten." I reported grades saying, "Unofficial scholar," and he smiled, "Official courage counts more than framed diplomas, dusty, shame, souvenirs hanging." Nights asked questions, "Who now?" And I replied, "Someone practicing tomorrow nightly, beside hunger dreams receipts, courage maps reasons growing." I told hunger, "Behave," and it laughed. I trained champions without mercy, through tired ribs, stubborn hope, anxious laughter wounded. At work I announced, "One day boss," and brooms bowed, sweep destiny proudly past dust, shame lessons, yelling names gone. I promised mirrors, successful soon, and shadows sighed, "Success learns patience too," during layoffs, winters, summers, betrayals, blessings, internships, miracles. Sometimes I begged sleep, "Resume me," and nightmares answered, "Rehearse courage instead." Under sirens, questions, moonlights, or illness, doubt, kindness. I mailed resumes saying, "Choose me," and fate replied, "Prove tomorrow relentlessly before hunger publishes tears, courage receipts victories widely." Mrs. Grant insisted, "Come eat," and I joked, "I dine dreams exclusively," until rent admits loyalty, ownership, bravery, interest growing. I confessed, "I miss home," and she answered, "Homes build from names spoken, with care, daily stubborn prayer echoes now." I challenged streets, "Teach power," and puddles replied, "Reflect patience honestly before shoes learn languages of ambition, thunder homework faithfully." He phoned once saying, "Any news?" And I answered, "Still breathing greatness, yes, alone, always hungry, healing, listening, rising, unbroken." I ended calls whispering, "Never again," and engines replied, "Proceed, becoming impossible, past limits, scripts, sorrows, ceilings, histories, doubting finally." Nora from reception later texted, "Nice resume," and I thought, beginnings knock politely before thunderstorms, applause, contracts, futures widen horizons. I told myself, "Ask how," and questions answered. Escape invents teachers daily, Beyond classrooms, fathers, failures, fortunes, regrets, courage, purchases. I slept repeating, tomorrow listens, and dreams replied, speak clearer heart, darling, until daylight hires destiny loudly, softly, forever knowingly. I'm telling you, this thing hates me, I said, staring at the frozen screen. Caleb rolled closer on his chair. It doesn't hate you. It's confused. So are you. I'm doing exactly what the tutorial says. Tutorials lie, he said. People fix computers, not videos. He took my keyboard. Watch. I crossed my arms. If it works, I'm calling you a wizard forever. Deal. The screen blinked, then loaded. I gasped. You didn't even touch half the keys. I touched the right ones. We sat on the floor of the office with greasy boxes between us. I said, this is dinner. He raised his soda. To luxury. I laughed. How are you always okay with this? Because it's ours, he said. A tiny corner of the world that doesn't kick us out. I stared at him. You ever get scared it'll disappear? Every minute, he said. That's why I show up early. I hesitated, then said my dad kicked me out. Caleb didn't joke. When? Last year. What? I talked back at a dinner. He shook his head. One day he'll wish he hadn't. I snorted. People don't wake up kinder. Parents do, he said. When it's too late. I looked at the ceiling. I don't want late. I want now. Caleb said softly, then build a life that doesn't wait for him. He handed me a cable. Plug it. Where? Where it fits. I wish life worked like that. It does, he said. We just force wrong places. Weeks passed inside glowing screens and cheap laughter. We slept on chairs sometimes, heads on desks. I said, we're basically ghosts. Rich ghosts, Caleb replied. Future rich. One afternoon, a girl stopped by the door. She asked, is this where dreams get fixed? I froze. Caleb grinned. Depends. You broken? She smiled at me. Maybe. I said, I'm not a technician. I didn't say machines, she replied. We walked to a tiny cafe. She said, I'm Maya. I paused. Me? She laughed. Nice to meet you, me. She listened when I talked. Like I mattered. I said, sometimes I don't exist unless someone looks. She said, I'm looking. I told her about nights in my car. She didn't flinch. You deserve a bed that knows your name. I swallowed. That's a nice thing to say. It's a true thing, she answered. Caleb winked later. Someone likes you. I shook my head. She just feels sorry. She feels something, he said. Don't shrink it. Maya kept coming. She brought sandwiches and questions. I said, why are you here? She said, because you talk like tomorrow owes you. I told her my fear of becoming invisible. She said, then be loud in quiet ways. I said, like what? Build, she replied. Caleb rolled out a whiteboard. Time to make stuff. I said, we don't know enough. Learn by bleeding, he said. We coded, crashed, rebuilt. I groaned. Failure loves me. Caleb grinned. Then date it briefly and dump it. Maya sat on the floor, reading her notes. She said, your ideas are brave. I whispered, so are you. One night I confessed, I don't think I'm worth this. She cupped my face. Then let us decide. I slept easier after that. Caleb said, told you. Build a life that doesn't wait. When our first tiny app sold, I stared at the screen. Is this real? Caleb shouted. We exist. Maya squeezed my hand. You always did. I looked around our messy office. This is home, I said. Caleb nodded. And it's just starting. I said, we made it. And Caleb laughed like he was afraid to believe me. Say it again, he said. And I said, we made it until the office sounded rich. Phones rang like promises. Emails blinked like stars. Maya kissed my cheek and said, finally, but her eyes were already somewhere else. I said, you're quiet, and she said, I'm thinking bigger. I asked, bigger than us? She shrugged, bigger than this. I smiled, pretending it didn't cut. He clapped my back. Boss, he joked, and I tried to enjoy the word. That night felt unreal and loud inside. I said, let's celebrate, and Maya checked her phone. In a minute, she answered, not looking at me. Later, by the hallway, I heard her whisper, he's temporary, and someone laughed softly. My stomach folded. I stepped back before air betrayed me. When I asked, temporary what? She blinked. Temporary phase, she said too fast. I said, phase with my name? She sighed, don't be dramatic. I said, don't be distant. She said, I want better things, and the better things looked exactly like me without me, standing alone, smiling wrong brave, numb tonight, forever, somehow, always already outside there. I said, stay, and she packed a small bag like it weighed nothing. I love you. I offered, cheap as spare change. She kissed my forehead. You love hope, she corrected. I followed to the door. Wait, I said. Grow, she answered. Her car confessed goodbye with a cough. I stood where shoes remembered us. My phone held its breath. I whispered, I'll be better, to a street that didn't care. Then I laughed once, broken glass in my throat, because success had learned my address before love did yesterday, supposedly promised bright miracles anyway, sometimes never truly ever again. I told Caleb, we're okay, and he said, we're dangerous, smiling like tomorrow owed us rent. I signed papers with hands that used to shake. Welcome aboard, I told strangers who soon called me boss. Desks appeared. Plants pretended innocence. The new office smelled like money and paint. I walked the halls and practiced breathing. This is mine, I said, unbelieving. Caleb clapped. No, he said, this is ours. I nodded, then worked until night forgot my face and lights named me important every single day afterward without weekend's mercy or sleep ever again, maybe never once at all anywhere. I sat alone with trophies that couldn't talk back. Are you proud? I asked the mirror. It answered with my father's mouth. Not enough. I poured coffee and remembered Rain. I said, he'd hate this view. The city winked. I said, he'd love it, then hated myself for agreeing. The higher I went, the quieter my phone behaved. Friends celebrated numbers. I counted absences. Fix me, I asked success. He replied with checks. I folded them into boats that sank in memory. Every time, without permission, forgiveness, warmth, echo, arrival answers, sunrise, sunset, many nights lately. I refreshed my inbox like a gambler. Pay me, I joked. It paid me with silence. Then a subject line blinked. Service contract request. I frowned. Cleaning, I said. Caleb peeked. Outsource it, he shrugged. I clicked. A company name loaded slowly like a dare. My pulse wrote letters inside my ears. No, I whispered without knowing why. The cursor waited. Open it, Caleb said. I did. My stomach learned a new language called dread and pronounced it perfectly that second, while hope backed away, quietly apologizing to courage again for leaving early today, alone here with receipts of rain. I stared at the screen until it stared back. Why today? I asked nobody. The office buzzed with a happiness I couldn't enter. Say something, Caleb urged. I swallowed glass and said, it's nothing. He knew better. Your face is writing poems, he said badly. I laughed worse. The email kept breathing. I said, let's ignore it. Caleb said, let's read it again. My hand shook like they'd learned winter early. I felt my father walk across my spine wearing boots made of years and promises unpaid, arriving late, loud, unforgiving, uninvited tonight, suddenly again, somehow, always near me here. I closed my laptop and couldn't close my heart. Tomorrow, I told it like a threat. Caleb said, whatever it is, we face it. I nodded, brave as paper. The city outside practiced noise. I practiced lying still. You're safe, I whispered. My pulse disagreed loudly. I wrote a list called Future and forgot to breathe. Maya's voice visited, saying better things meant better distances. I erased her name and wrote my own. The screen blinked behind my eyes, promising answers with teeth, and sleep refused every offer until morning sold me fear, wholesale cheap dreams, separately tonight, only please. I opened the contract and whispered, no, like the screen might apologize. Caleb leaned over. What? I turned the monitor. Read the name. He squinted. That's your dad's company. I know. You okay? I lied. Perfect. Nora knocked. Morning, boss. Morning, I said too bright. She smiled. The cleaners start today. I nodded. Great. Caleb said, cancel it. I shook my head. No. What? Because, I said, ghosts don't knock twice. I pretended to work while my heart counted footstep possibilities. Nora said, coffee. I said, yes. She paused. You look pale. I feel successful. I joked badly. Then the door clicked. A man cleared his throat outside. Nora said, right this way. I stood behind glass like a coward in a museum. He walked in wearing gray and a name tag that said Rich. It wasn't his name, but it used to be ours. His shoulders dipped inward like they were tired of being helpful. His hair had given up the fight. Nora said, this is our main conference room. He said, clean by noon. His voice was cracked wood. I swallowed. He wheeled the cart inside my office. The door closed behind him, not locked, just loud. He didn't look at me. He looked at dust. I wanted to say, Dad. I said, morning, instead. He nodded without lifting his eyes. Morning, sir. Sir. The word weighed more than my paycheck. I said, take your time. He said, I don't get paid to. I almost laughed. I almost cried. He wiped my desk carefully. I thought you never wipe my tears. I thought, don't think. He muttered, rich people love glass. I asked, why is that? He answered, so they can see themselves everywhere. I said, is that bad? He shrugged. Depends who they're seeing. Nora popped in. Everything all right? He said, yes, miss. She smiled. Good. He's picky. I said, I am. She winked. Aren't you? He wheeled away and returned with a cloth like it was a flag. He polished my name on the door. He didn't read it. I felt stupid for wanting him to. I asked, how long you been doing this? He said, long enough to forget what I wanted first. I said, what did you want first? He paused. A family that listened. My throat staged a riot. He added, life's louder when you're young. I said, is it quieter now? He smiled thin. No, you just get used to shouting inside. He finished the desk and straightened my chair. I said, you didn't have to. He said, habit. Nora returned with a clipboard. Sign here. I signed without seeing letters. She said to him, welcome aboard. He nodded like boarding a ship he'd built badly. After she left, he said, nice place. I said, thanks. He said, must have worked hard. I said, hard enough. He looked at the city. I used to want windows. I asked why. He said, to remember where I wasn't. He gathered trash and found my old notebook. He read the cover aloud. Escape plan. I snatched it. It's stupid. He said, plans aren't. I said, some are. He laughed once. It sounded unused. He said, I had one once. I said, what happened to it? He shrugged. It didn't forgive me. Nora called from the hall. Sir, bathroom needs you. He nodded. Coming. He turned to me. Sorry for the mess. I said, it's fine. I meant this is everything. When he left, Caleb texted from 3 desks away. That him. I typed yes. He wrote, breathe. I wrote. I forgot how. He sent a dumb cat sticker. It didn't help. It helped. He came back later to empty the bin. I said, do you like the job? He said, jobs are chairs. You sit until they break. I asked, why sit at all? He smiled. Because falling is quieter when you're already down. I offered coffee. He hesitated. I'm not supposed to. I said, rules bend. He took the cup like forgiveness. He sipped. Good. I said, local roast. He said, tastes like mornings. I said, some are better. He said, some pretend. Nora leaned in again. Everything good? I said, great. He said, yes, miss. She left. He looked at my hands. You shake. I lied, too much coffee. He nodded. Happens. He pushed the cart toward the door. See you tomorrow, sir, he said. Tomorrow. Another word with weight. I replied, see you. When he left, I sat down and finally looked at my name. It stared back like a dare. Caleb whispered, you okay? I whispered no. He said, me too. I laughed because that sounded like mercy. I almost called him by his real name. I didn't. I opened a new file and titled it Don't Speak. The cursor blinked like a heart, not trusting itself. I told the empty chair, I won't break. It didn't answer. I told the glass, I will watch. It watched me watching him leave. Outside, the city sold noise. Inside, I counted breaths like coins. I said aloud, welcome to my office, Dad. To nobody. Same desk, every morning. I said like it didn't matter. He nodded. Dust likes favorites. Weeks walked in wearing my voice. He cleaned. I pretended to type. One morning I asked, do you like quiet? He shrugged. It doesn't ask questions. Another day I said, you're early. He answered, Early keeps secrets. I hated that he sounded wise now. He noticed a photo frame on my shelf. Family, he asked. No, I said quickly. He nodded like that made sense. Sometimes he talked while wiping glass. Lost a son once, he said softly. My chest cracked like ice. I said, I'm sorry. He looked surprised. Thank you. I wanted to shout, you didn't lose me. You threw me away. I swallowed it like poison. He whispered once. I dream of his voice. I stared at my keyboard. I said, dreams lie. He replied, they tell truth wearing masks. I found his pay stub wrong 1 week. Payroll mistake, I told Nora. She fixed it. I added extra cash into the envelope. She asked, bonus? I said, performance. He thanked me without names. God bless, he said. I answered, I work in tech. One afternoon, he spoke of Linda. She left, he said. I said nothing. He smiled sadly. She wanted glitter. I had dust. I almost said, you raised dust and called it gold. He added, son won't call. I asked, why not? He hates me, he said simply. I said, you don't know that. He shook his head. I know men. I learned his new favorite phrase, too late. Everything he touched sided. I asked once, why not visit? He said, doors remember fingerprints. I whispered, so do hearts. He didn't hear. Days stacked quiet on quiet. I paid him extra each month. He never asked why. Caleb watched this like it was storm news. He texted, are you okay? I typed, I'm practicing hate in smaller doses. He replied, careful, it leaks. I deleted his warning. I started leaving notes under envelopes. Thank you for your work. No name. He started smiling more. It felt like theft. One evening he said, you're kind. I laughed. He frowned. Wrong word. I said, rare. He once found my childhood scar on my hand. Same place, he said. I asked what? He said, my boy cut his here. I said, coincidence. He nodded too fast. Another day, he said, I keep a box of letters. I replied, from who? He said, my kid. I froze. He added, unsent. I bargained with oxygen. I asked, why write if you don't send? He answered, so regret can breathe. I almost told him everything then. The office held its breath. But revenge sat beside me like a friend. Nora said once, he's good. I replied, he's thorough. She smiled. And gentle. I swallowed. Bad news found him weekly. Company failing, he confessed. I said, I'm sorry. He replied, pride doesn't take apologies. I heard him on phone calls in hallways. I'm trying, he said once. I pressed my ear to my own heart to hear memory. I slipped more cash through payroll. Performance, I repeated. He bought new shoes. They squeaked hope. Thank you, he said again one morning. For seeing me, he said. I wanted to scream, you never saw me. Instead I said, you're doing fine. He nodded. That helps. Weeks stacked into months. Every night I asked, which hurts more? Silence voted. One afternoon, he handed me a folded paper. My resignation, he said. My chest shouted no. He added, just thinking, not submitting. I breathed. But I should, he continued. Why? I croaked. He replied, this place wakes ghosts. I said sharply, stay. He blinked. Sir. I corrected, stay please. He obeyed like a prayer. The next day I received a message from Ethan's old number. He's sick, it read. No name. I stared at the words like they carried judgment. I deleted the message. He walked in moments later. Morning, he said. I answered, morning. He scrubbed the same desk. I watched, torn between damage and mercy. I told myself, this is justice. Another voice said, this is cruel. Every night, I chose which voice to starve. Some mornings I failed. One day he said, you remind me of someone. I asked who. He smiled sadly. Someone I broke. I stood dizzy. I said, people survive breakage. He whispered, not all. I turned away. I tipped him again. He cleaned my tears without knowing. I let him. Rich people are all the same, my father said loudly, scrubbing the counter like it had insulted him first. Nora stiffened. Careful, she murmured. He laughed. What, my boss gonna hear from inside his glass castle? I did. I opened my door. The hinge whispered before I did. You don't like rich people? I asked calmly. He turned, surprised. Morning, sir. Didn't mean you. I smiled thin. You meant me. Nora froze. I cut her off. It's okay. He shrugged. Look, some folks don't remember the floor once they climb. I said, which floor? The bottom one, he replied. The cold one. I walked closer. Say it again. He frowned. Say what? That I'm the same. He hesitated. No offense, sir. I'm asking. I said, tell me to my face. He sighed. Rich people forget names. I answered, then let me give you mine. He blinked. Sir, I said it slowly, cleanly. I'm your boss. My name is the boy you kicked out. The room broke. He stared at me like language had betrayed him. No, he breathed. Nora whispered, what? Caleb stood from his desk. You should hear him. I didn't move. Say my name. The mop slipped from his hand and slapped the tile. He grabbed the counter. No, that's not. Say it, I insisted. His mouth tried. Failed. Tried again. I helped him. Say it. Son, he whispered, and then louder, shaking son. Nora covered her mouth. Caleb murmured, oh my God. I said full name. His eyes found my face, old and new at once. My boy, he said. I waited. He felt like a bad building and caught my sleeve. I'm sorry, he cried. I'm so sorry. People stared. I didn't pull away. I didn't know, he sobbed, too loud for dignity. I swear I didn't know. I said softly, you never wanted to know. He hit his chest. Forgive me. I answered, for what? For everything. I asked, name one. He choked. The door. I said, another. The bag. I said, another. My voice. I said, another. My pride. I said, another. My silence. I said, that's enough. He slid down, sitting on the floor like a child punished by years. I was angry. I said, you were cruel. I was afraid. You were violent. I didn't mean it. You meant every word. He grabbed my ankle. Please. I replied, let go. He released me like the floor burned. I lost you, he whispered. I knelt to his level. You threw me. Caleb spoke once. Sir. I lifted a hand. Not now. Nora whispered. Do you want me to? No, I said. Stay. I turned back to him. You want forgiveness? He nodded frantically. I asked, for you or for me? He broke again. For both. I said, then listen. The office held breath. I slept outside, I said quietly. I learned winter early. He covered his face. I learned hunger's accent. He rocked. I learned how to be invisible. He moaned my name. I learned to be my own father. I finished. He said I would take it back. I replied, life doesn't take receipts. I thought you'd be fine, he said. I stood. You thought wrong. He tried to rise and failed. I deserve this. I said, you deserve memory. He whispered, I lost everything. I corrected, you lost me first. He looked up, swollen with failure. What do you want? I answered, not revenge. He flinched. Not love. He sobbed. Not even hate. He waited. I want truth. He nodded wildly. Ask. I asked. Did you ever miss me? He closed his eyes. Every morning. I asked. Did you ever look for me? He hesitated. I raised my brow. He cried, I was scared. I whispered, that's the truth. I stood straight. You don't get my tears today. He pleaded, one hug. I shook my head. No, son, he whispered. I said clearly, not anymore. The office exhaled. Caleb squeezed my shoulder. I stepped away from it. I said to my father, you can finish today. He trembled. Thank you. I added, tomorrow, you work under your real name. He asked, what is it? I said, stranger. He nodded like I'd branded him. Nora spoke softly. Sir, I'm so sorry. I smiled. Me too. He picked up the mop with hands that once dropped me. He said, I will fix myself. I said, fix nothing in me. He asked, can I write? I answered, ink is cheaper than change. He scrubbed quietly. I returned to my glass. Caleb followed. You okay? I said, I'm breathing. He said, you were brave. I replied, I was 16 again. From inside my office, I watched him work without a name. Nora whispered, do you want water? I said, do you want a miracle? She blinked. I smiled sadly. Then no. The day kept ticking. His shoulders kept sinking. My voice stayed standing. I wrote my name on a sticky note and placed it on my desk. I read it once. Then I turned it face down and went back to work. Because some truths don't need witnesses. I'm not firing you, I said before he could apologize again. He flinched. You should. I won't, I replied. He whispered, thank you. I added, but I won't be your son again. Silence stood between us like a locked door. He nodded once. I understand. I said to you. He swallowed. I will. After that, he worked quietly. No stories. No advice. No ghosts. Nora asked me, are you okay now? I said, I'm functional. She answered, that counts. I smiled. Some days. Caleb said, you look lighter. I said, I dropped something heavy. He asked what? I replied, expectations. I started dating. I didn't announce it. Life did. A woman named Julia sat across from me one night and asked, do you trust easily? I laughed. I invoiced trust. She grinned. Fair price. I said, depends who's buying. We walked, talked, didn't promise. I told her, I break quietly. She answered, then I'll listen loudly. I forgot to check the hallways. I forgot to count footfalls. I forgot his voice. Caleb teased, you're glowing. I said, radiation. He said, love. I said, contractual happiness. Julia touched my hand and said, you're not a problem to solve. I whispered, then why do I feel like homework? She answered, because you're worth studying. I dreamed less. When I did, rain made sense. At work, my father nodded when passing me. I nodded back. Two strangers with shared weather. Nora once said, he's retiring. I replied, good. She watched me. I didn't blink. One evening, Julia asked, do you want children? I froze like an old photograph. Then I said, I want kindness. She smiled. We can start there. Caleb bought a couch and announced, we are officially adults. I lay on it and said, send help. He laughed. Survivor. I forgave myself at random. While eating. While walking. While saying no. I told Julia, I used to confuse silence for safety. She said, and now? I answered, now I choose people who sing. My father started leaving earlier. He cleaned less. He spoke never. One Friday, Nora said he's gone. I asked home. She answered gone. On my desk sat an envelope. No stamp. Just my name written like a question. I stared. Caleb asked, read it? I said, not yet. He nodded. Later is brave. Julia texted, dinner? I wrote, freedom tastes good. She replied, save me a bite. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer. It didn't rattle. It breathed. That night, Julia rested her head on my chest and asked, what scares you now? I said, accidentally becoming my father. She whispered, you're not built that way. I said, everyone is buildable. She answered, then we choose better tools. I slept without arguing my dreams. Weeks passed with gentle noises. Invoices. Laughs. Warm kitchens. Caleb announced, we're opening a second office. I asked why. He grinned. Because the first one believed you. I stood by the window and said, I think I'm okay. He slapped my shoulder. About time. Nora approached with a small box. He asked me to give this to you, she said quietly. What is it? She answered a goodbye. Inside were my childhood drawings. Folded. Saved. Caleb whispered, he kept them. I whispered, I know. I didn't open the letter. Julia held my hand and said, you don't owe the past a stage. I replied, then it won't get one. I mailed the box to myself. No return address. At dinner, Julia said, I like your laugh. I said, it's new. She smiled. Keep it. I stood in a mirror later and told my reflection, we're safe. It answered with breath. The drawer stayed shut. Power didn't heal me. Time didn't fix me. Love didn't rescue me. Choice did. I chose silence where noise once owned me. I chose mornings. Nora asked, you want the drawer cleaned out? I said, keep it. She asked what? I answered, some things wait because they're patient. Julia kissed my cheek and said, you're home. I closed my eyes. I am. Caleb texted, proud of you. I replied, still breathing. I walked through the office like a guest in my own life. It welcomed me. That night, I promised myself, I will not inherit pain. I'm in it. The letter stayed sealed. Not heavy, not loud, just there, like a choice. I opened the envelope saying, today, truth visits quietly. My hands replied, sit down. We'll listen together carefully. The paper whispered, Son, I failed you terribly completely. I answered, say it clearer, coward. Earn each ache tonight. He wrote, I chose pride. It chose loneliness for me. I muttered, loneliness bought you cheaply, Dad. Return leftovers now. The letter insisted, I ask nothing. Keep your beautiful distance. I laughed. Distance became my childhood bedroom, furnished by hunger. He confessed, I feared mirrors. They show me your eyes. I replied, my eyes learned darkness. Yours learned excuses instead. The page continued, I am small without your forgiveness given. I said, stay small. Growth belongs to abandoned sons finally. He begged inkless, remember me when courage stops visiting evenings. I countered, courage moved in permanently. It changed every lock. The letter trembled. I kept drawings. They were prayers folded. I sighed. Prayers reach ears. You closed yours deliberately always. He promised, I will die quieter. Forgive my former noise. I whispered, death doesn't negotiate. Life charged interest daily here. Paper concluded, I loved you poorly. Accept refusal gracefully, please. I leaned back. Grace learned my address. You forgot deliveries. Tears visited eyes, saying, we're leaving without destroying anything tonight. My chest agreed. Break later. Breathe now. Historian of pain. I folded memory, replying, thank you. Now leave my pockets. The envelope obeyed. We were only receipts, never refunds offered. I stood. Receipts burn. Smoke spells freedom for survivors today. Outside asked, where go? I answered, endings rent rides. Tires spoke, destination. I replied, where forgiveness can't vote. Streets listen, tell us. I whispered, past, keep walking. I parked, breathing. This house remembers fists, voices, broken clocks. The door squeaked, welcome. I said, no, just goodbye now. Rooms echoed, father. I replied, stranger, vacancy suits you. Kitchen murmured, hunger hosted here. I answered, it moved out. Walls asked, you staying? I declared, I'm evacuating shadows. I sat on floors saying, wood remembers knees begging prayers. Silence answered. Knees grew wings, escaped ceilings nightly afterward. I touched windows. Rain once named me. Now sun renames me. Staircase whispered, fall. I smiled. No, ascend elsewhere bravely. Bedroom sighed, dream. I responded, dreams rent better dresses now. Closet grieve suits. I promised, I'll tailor time, not fabric. Bathroom confessed, tears. I granted, one visit, no residency. Mirror asked who. I answered, someone unchained from older names. Clock announced, leaving, I corrected, arriving somewhere immeasurable already. I rose proclaiming, goodbyes are keys. Doors become rumors afterward. Porch offered air, saying, carry lighter. I dropped old weather. Yard confessed. I kept secrets. I replied, I keep futures. Neighbor wind asked, look back. I declined. Eyes prefer forward. Steps counted one. I added courage, like extra heartbeat confirmation. Road teased legacy. I returned. Livelihood beats. Names tomorrow always. Horizon winked. Office. I grinned. Bigger rooms for forgiveness. I signed leases saying, size measures second chances successfully sometimes. Walls greeted, boss. I answered, worker for tomorrow's miracles. Key jingled, ownership. I translated, opportunity teaches rent humility. Desks promised, build. I ordered, kindness with deadlines attached. Phone sang, hello. I replied, yes, bring possibilities indoors. Windows brag, views. I concluded, perspective pays dividends generously. Caleb texted, open yet. I wrote, victory drinks morning coffee. Nora asked, celebrate? I said, we breathe, that's festivals. Julia called, dinner. I responded, freedom tastes like Tuesday. I laughed, order anything. Grief doesn't control menus here. Chalkboard demanded, motto. I considered survival sponsors entrepreneurship kindly. Plants whispered, water. I replied, growth understands thirst thoroughly. Elevator announced, up. I answered, healing doesn't use floors. Lights asserted, shine. I corrected, warmth works harder than glare. Hallways wondered, are you whole? I retorted, I'm chosen. Printer grumbled, paper. I promised, stories will pay rent. Calendar noted, anniversary. I replied, birthdays belong to tomorrow. Inbox blinked, congratulations. I sighed, flowers grow from ruins. I stretched, saying, strength is quieter than waving flags, anywhere. Mirror smiled, better. I admitted, not fixed, free instead. Breath suggested, rest. I agreed. After joy clocks out. Desk listened, confessions. I shared, learning outruns bloodline curses. Chair advised, lean. I rebutted, stand tall. Hearts kneel. Coffee laughed, bitter. I replied, truth sweetens everything eventually. Phone whispered, father. I answered, silence audits previous debts. Drawer rustled, letter. I insisted, archive without appointments or demands. Memory approved, released. I celebrated, parole granted to tomorrow. City roared, name. I glowed, call me possibility. Contract chimed, signed. I exhaled, goodbye poverty, hello patience. Ceiling confessed, stars. I responded, windows negotiate galaxies nightly. Floor encouraged, dance. I joked, bills tap louder sometimes. Laughter reminded, alive. I toasted, to ordinary heroism daily. Shadows asked, fear. I ruled, exile beyond my passport. Sunrise declared, morning. I replied, birth certificate updated quietly. Firmament consented, future. I barked, report for wondrous duty. Mail arrived, welcome. I answered, I accept destiny's invitation. Engine hummed, forward. I smiled, departure stamps memory kindly. Shoes insisted, walk. I commanded, grow faster than regret. Nameplate gleamed, owner. I corrected, guardian of second chances. Heart announced, open. I signed, witnessed by courage today. Remember, I wasn't born strong. I was abandoned into strength.